Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2026 Directors Closeup Spirit Awards Edition. My name is Jeremy Aguilera Gaudet, Project Manager for Education and International Programs at Film Independent, and we are thrilled that you can join us today to hear from these amazing directors. A reminder that we have panels tomorrow and all of next week featuring more of the writers, directors, and creators behind this year's best independent films and television, so be sure to check out the listings on our website and don't forget to watch. I would like to thank this year's incredible supporters of the Directors Close-Up, the Directors Guild of America, SAG Indie, and IMDb Pro. And thank you to our 2026 Film Independent Spirit Award supporters, premier sponsor Lavazza Coffee, principal sponsor IMDb Pro, and official partner Fiji Water. We appreciate their support and devotion to the independent film community. Thank you for tuning in to day 3 of our series as we welcome this year's directors behind the incredible films nominated for Best International Film. To ask questions during today's webinar, please use the Q&A function located at the bottom of your Zoom screen to type in your question. We will get to as many of them as we can during the panel. And here with us today, I'm very excited to welcome Cherien Dabis, writer and director of All That's Left of You. Hi, Cherien. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
We have Kleber Mendonça Filho, writer and director of The Secret Agent. Um, all right, he is here, so he will join in a second. We also have Oliver Laxe, co-writer and director of SIRÀT.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, Oliver. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
And Simón Mesa Soto, writer and director of A Poet.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Simón. And finally, and moderating today's panel is producer Alison Dickey. Welcome, Alison.
Hi.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And Alison, I will turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Well, first, I just want to welcome all you wonderful filmmakers and thank you so much participating in this director's close-up panel. We're really grateful to have you joining in this conversation. And I also wanted to say congratulations on all the accolades and the success of your films so far in a really strong year of films. These are real standouts. They're truly fantastic films, and we're really excited to dive in. I wanted to say that today we're going to talk conversationally about the genesis of the projects, um, and important creative decisions that shaped your film, your process, and anything else you'd like to talk about. I know you've been interviewed a lot about these films, so we want to keep it fresh. So you can always like sort of attack something from an angle that's going to be interesting for you yourself to discuss. I wanted to mention that our audience today is a combination of film lovers and filmmakers, and so we can tailor the conversation a bit to make it interesting for everybody, meaning that we can even get into the sauce a little bit about, actual filmmaking processes that are going to be interesting to this audience. Um, and if you guys have any questions for each other, I mean, these are all such amazing films. Feel free to crosstalk. It makes it much more dynamic and fun to for everybody involved. So I just wanted to say that, and then our listening audience again. I think Jeremy mentioned it, but if you have any questions, you can include them on your Q&A tab, and we'll get to them at the end of the panel. So as a baseline and place to start, I'd like to ask each of you how this film came to be. When and how did the idea develop, and how did that inspiration turn into a film? Which is rather remarkable. I think we'll start with Cherien. And as a point of uh, process, some of the audience members have seen the films and some haven't. So I'm going to give like a very brief description, and then you know, we'll pivot back to you. So um, All That's Left of You follows a Palestinian family across 3 generations amidst the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Shireen's previous films explored themes of immigration, discrimination, cultural assimilation, and family. Her first 2 films were kind of I don't know, a diptych or related to each other in the way that Amrika was about being an Arab in America, and May in the Summer was about being an Arab, a an American in the Middle East. So in All That's Left of You, I was struck by the scope and span and depth of the film. It feels so epic and so intimate at the same time. How did the idea for this one come together, just in your journey and trajectory as a filmmaker?
Well, I would say the first idea really came from the desire to tell a Nakba story. The Nakba is what Palestinians call the year 1948, when more than 750,000 Palestinians, half the Palestinian population, was ethnically cleansed to create a Jewish majority state. And as a Palestinian who grew up in the diaspora, keenly aware of our dehumanization and the fact that most people didn't know a lot about Palestine, let alone what happened to Palestinians in 1948, as it is a story that is actively denied and omitted from history books, I really wanted to tell that story. And it's really, the Nakba is a collective trauma for all Palestinians. So in many ways, I knew from the beginning that the movie was an exploration of my own trauma, my own collective inherited trauma. And that's really what I wanted to do, was just kind of ask the question of whether it was possible to heal from a trauma that is ongoing, that hasn't ended. So that was kind of the first idea. I sat with this idea for about 5 years, developing it before I ever started writing, because I felt such a tremendous amount of responsibility to tell the story. The story has never been told in cinema. And I knew it had to be multi-generational because the Nakba never ended. What began really in 1948, and even before then, but the year 1948 is the Nakba. It never really ended. It has continued and accelerated, and But what I really wanted to do, because as a Palestinian, I always felt so deeply politicized when I didn't want to be, and I think all Palestinians really are deeply politicized. We didn't ask for any of this. I wanted to tell a story about a family, and I wanted to tell really a story about a family attempting to survive decades of political turmoil, and showing kind of the passage of the trauma and the fact that the trauma will just continue to be passed in this way. And so that is really the heart of the film, is really kind of the extraordinary will, and love that it takes to survive all of this. And ultimately, it's about, I think it's a movie that's really about kind of holding on to our humanity in the face of impossible circumstances, because the systems of oppression want nothing more than to strip us of our humanity. And so I wanted to make a really kind of loving and compassionate film, because that's my experience of being Palestinian, and, one that is about family survival.
Yeah, I mean, I was really struck by your ability to span from 1948 to 2022, in the chapters of the film, and you're addressing all the issues you were just talking about, but the humanity, the element in terms of the storyline about the organ donation, where you literally break it down in the last third of the movie about, like, what is a heart, like what
Right.
is,
Spoiler alert for
because
anyone who hasn't seen the movie.
maybe,
Little
yeah,
bit of
well,
a spoiler
anyway.
alert, but that's okay. That's
No,
okay.
it's, that what makes a human a human.
Yeah. No, really. I mean,
And
it does it attempts to break down what are these nationalities, what are these kind of differences that we are allowing to kind of keep us from seeing each other's pain and seeing each other's
yeah,
suffering. And that storyline, I like to call it a moral dilemma so as not to give it away, but the organ donation storyline was really about me broadening the scope of the film and talking about why all of the suffering is happening to begin with. And and really basically just saying, if we're all so mired in our own pain and suffering, we're not willing to see that of another, or not willing to see how we're perpetuating that of another, then we're part of the problem. We're part of, right, this kind of, we're perpetuating an increasingly violent world. And really, the way I saw the film is, obviously it's based on historic events, but all of those historic and political events are really in the background. They're the kind of macro, and they allow me to kind of create the sweep of the film, but the focus of the film is the micro. It's the family and how history shapes people, how people are forever changed by their environment and what is happening all around them, how it affects, it infiltrates the domestic environment. It changes relationships between husband and wife and father and son and mother and son. And it changes the fates of families in ways that I think people don't often really think about, that the violence is all encompassing. It's not just physical violence, it's psychological violence, it's administrative violence. There's different kinds of violence shown in the film, but it's not about those moments. It's really about the consequences of those moments and how they impact this family over time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
And
it
that's where
was,
all that intimate kind of, that's where the intimacy
yeah.
that you're talking about is coming from, is
I
that focus
mean, the
on the
film just
family.
gets it just continues to get more and more intimate as you unpack all these things in this really masterful way. It's really fantastic. So thank you so much, Cherien. I hope everyone gets to see this movie. If you haven't seen this movie, it's really important. Um, the next one we'll go to uh, Secret Agent. Um, Kleber, I wanted to ask you the same question, but I'll just sort of give a little quick overview of the film for anyone who hasn't had a chance to see it yet. Um, uh, you started as a film critic and then began making films in the 2000s. You had Neighboring Sounds, and then Aquarius in 2016 was also nominated for a Spirit Award for Best International Film. So we're actually welcoming you back with this nomination. And then you made Bacurau in 2019, which was a really fantastic film. You can describe The Secret Agent in so many different ways. You can say it's a neo-noir historic political thriller. It also feels like a very personal movie. The film starts at the end of Carnival and follows Armando, played by the wonderful Wagner Moura, who's a former professor caught in the political turmoil in the midst of the Brazilian military dictatorship as he attempts to flee persecution and is set up with a new identity in a safe house in Recife. All that said, there is a brilliant opening card that simply reads, "Our story is set in the Brazil of 1977, a period of great mischief. Dot, dot, dot." And I think that like perfectly sets up the tone and energy of the movie. So how did this film come about, and what was the spark, and how did it come together for you?
Thank you for the question. Great to be here talking to you all. It all began with the desire to develop something with Wagner, someone I love very much and was a great artist. I wanted to do a thriller, and I wanted it to be set in the 1970s. And as I was writing the script, began to I thought I would be quietly working on a script set in the 70s, very kind of far away from contemporary Brazil. But very soon I began to realize that I was actually writing, well, of course, there is a lot of historical context in the film, but I was actually writing about contemporary Brazil because in 2016, Brazil took a very hard turn to the right. And then the former president who's now in jail, he was democratically elected in 2018. And those 4 years, they were kind of outlandish and strange and ridiculous at the same time and very frightening. And what he was trying to do, he was trying to bring back the logic of the 1960s and 70s back to contemporary Brazil. Even bringing words which had been retired over the years, placing military types in modern government. Words like torture were being thrown around like it had never gone out of fashion. And soon I thought that this period piece had the logic of contemporary Brazil. On top of that, I was coming from my previous film, which is it's a documentary or a film essay called Pictures of Ghosts. And that film gave me a lot of wonderful archive material. It really took me back to the history of my city, Recife. It was very much about the city center and the movie palaces that are now gone. But that film gave me a lot of information about life in society. It reconnected myself with my own childhood memories of cinema and the city itself. And I really feel that The Secret Agent would not exist without Pictures of Ghosts. So it's really interesting what Cherien said about politicizing. I never really think in terms of making a political film, but of course, when you are very honest about life in society and how it's lived, and you're dealing with a film that is discussing the use of power to squash somebody else, you will inevitably make a political film. And then, yeah, we premiered in Cannes, and the film has. I've been traveling to so many places with the film, and it seems to offer some kind of mirror depending on which country it streams. I had a strong experience in San Sebastian in Spain, where I got a lot of feedback about the Franco era, about how so many Spanish find it so hard to deal with, the wounds of the past, which is, of course, a very strong subject in Brazil. A lot of great, strong reactions in the United States um, about, I think, very much of what is taking place or has been taking place in the United States over the last few years. And of course, in Brazil, the film has become very successful. So the desire to work with Wagner, a reconstruction of a time period, which is very personal to me, and the observation of a dark moment, which I can happily tell you that is now gone, and we are in a much better shape now in this country.
Yes, I appreciate everything you're saying about all those sort of desires to bring those those elements together that were of interest to you. But I found that it was one of the most unique things about the film was the blend of politics with the backdrop of cinema from the time. You could tell it was a love letter to a place you knew well, a time period, just the way that people interact with each other in that place in that time. And there's uh, even though there's definitely a thriller and there's true suspense, there's also a lot of humor and there's a sort of you're not afraid, to include a touch of the bizarre or, uh, so I thought that was just very unique and original sort of approach to the film. And, it's, we can talk more about that later, but I just thought that was, you had a lot of confidence, putting all of those elements together because you were following your own logic about how they coexist. Is that something
Thank
that
you.
you were like, is that something that you were intentionally trying to do, or were you just following your
It comes out of the writing process. There are many reactions about how funny the film is, but I think once you write a scene and you bring in these wonderful actors, and I really, yeah, the films I have made, they usually have more than 30 characters, and this one has 60 plus characters,
yeah.
and
Yes.
I really love the idea that a film feels like a little village, and that
Yeah.
you might remember this and that and she and
Mhm.
him and her, and then I think we have all spent our lives watching so many films. It's only natural that they should make you want to make a new film. And
Mhm.
it's I think also the logic of society is kind of fantastical. Not only contemporary society, but if we go back and look at history, and
Mhm.
we have all had to deal with the absurdity in living our lives, in society, and I just find it reasonable that a film can go into a few extremes to
Mhm.
be truthful.
Yeah, that's true. All your films share that in some way, sort of a commitment to um, uh, memory and present and the past and where you might be going. That's very handled very differently and in a very interesting way by all of you.
Yeah, I think that we all here are making pieces of archive, and this is something that I always have in mind when I make a film. It is a film with actors and sound and special effects, but at the end of the day, it will be hopefully put away in a shelf, and it will become a piece of archive, and memory is comes very naturally in terms of using it as a narrative device.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And let's talk to Oliver now about SIRÀT. Just in brief, and no spoilers here. This is a harrowing, uncompromising, gorgeous film, just with so much tension. SIRÀT follows a father played by Sergi Lopez, in search of his missing daughter, along with his son and a group of ravers in the deserts of southern Morocco. I think this is Oliver's fourth film. Um, and it starts with a card that describes Sirat as the Arabic word for path, or the Sirat Bridge is a perilous, metaphorical, or literal path that connects paradise and hell. And it's described in the beginning of the film as the bridge is as thin of as a strand of hair and sharper than a sword. So it's an incredibly evocative way to start this movie and present what you create in this framework. How did the idea for this film spark, and how did the movie come together?
First and foremost, thank you to inviting me, and hello to my colleagues, all of you. Uh, so I'm from Spain, from Galicia, from the north of Spain, and but after I finished my studies at university, I moved to Morocco, that is a neighbor country, and Spain, in a way, we Spaniards, we are bastards, we are like a mix of different cultures, Jewish heritage, Muslim heritage. So when I moved to Morocco, where I spent 12 years, kind of, at the beginning, I felt a deep connection. You were talking about memory, and the body is a space for memory. Our body is all the time telling us things. And when I arrived to Morocco, and I felt like I was at home in a way. And one sentence that they were saying, the people, when someone passed away, when people were surrounded by death, is a sentence that they were saying with a lot of serenity, acceptation, detachment. After I learned to say it, it's Inna lillahi wa inna ilahi rajiun. That means we come from God and we come back to God. And I insist, they say it when they are confronted to death. I was 22, 23 years old, and I felt myself a baby, and I knew that I had to make a practice, like celebrating death, embracing death. Um, so this film is part of this practice. I really wanted to die before dying, and I wanted to make a kind of rite of passage for spectators. I really wanted to invite the spectators to a ceremony. I wanted them to die watching the film. You die, I think, when you watch SIRÀT. in a way you are obliged to look inside, and because from my point of view, it's a healthy thing. It's something that we have to do more. Kleber was talking about the reactions in other countries, and when I'm showing the film in countries where there is a tradition, strong tradition, or where death is part of the culture, like in Mexico or Japan, for example, they understand this, they feel it, they are used to take the death as a door to life. And at the same time, I'm a filmmaker of images. So even before this intention of dying making this film, I already had images from the desert. I had images from with the trucks crossing the desert. My process creative is really visceral. It comes really from the gut and from the taste. It's like I have images. I was really related with the desert. I was living in there for 5 years. The locations, these mountains, that that tells you all the time you are nothing, you are small, be as if. And so this at some point, this is the way I work. It's like I have this intention, this and these images, and I just jump to the abyss in a way that is making a film that is really you give your body to the film, and the film really makes with you. I mean, kidnaps you. The image kidnaps you. I mean, me and my team, we are really junkies of images. I
Mhm.
think, and and SIRAT is the result of this intention, this artistic gesture of going through our limits. Going like rave culture, like spiritualities, like is our responsibility to die, to make a film like if it was the last one, and that's what we did.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's very it's so physical. And but the tension just shows your ability as a filmmaker to really you really know what um keeps people like glued in their seat, just riveted. And I mean, even the physical challenges of making that film are evident because you feel like you're a part of it in a weird way. You feel like there's not that much dialogue in the movie. It is sort of a symphony of images, but it's also just with that, using those tools, being able to create that tension was really very unique and incredible. So I thank you for describing how it came together. I wanted to ask just very quickly, did you have an immersion in the rave scene that allowed you to feel and understand the way that the sounds and vibrations exist in your body? And was that part of the inspiration to use that as the setting of the film?
Yeah, I study psychotherapy Gestalt,
Mhm.
and so we really wanted to make kind of shock therapy. We really trust on images, I think. You were talking about the desert, how difficult it is to shoot in the desert, and obviously, it was in June, but I think the worst enemy of our films is ourselves, the filmmakers, So the thing was to protect these images from myself, from my head, from my ideas, to really give myself to my intuition, to really, yes, to trust on images, and to trust on the magical, mysterious, and complex relation between an image and the human metabolism. This is something really complex, what is happening on a cinema.
Mhm.
It's really cinema, theater is really a place for catharsis. It's really a place for transformation. That's what I felt, going outside, I mean, watching films, you feel, eh?
Mhm.
You understand you feel you have the film in your skin, so that was the purpose, to watch the sound, to listen the image, to really build an sculpture with all my artisans, all these artists that I did with which I did the film, to really to yes to make yeah, to make a monster, something alive. You know, I
Yeah,
mean, a
we'll
film at
talk
some
about
point,
that.
it's something. I mean, if the images are alive, you know, it has magnetism. It can hypnotize you. You know, it's sorcery.
Yeah, it's
Why?
true. And
Why?
we'll talk about that a little more later, just about like the group that you put together to create that magic with, and what how that, really can inform your film for sure. But anyway, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. Um, let's talk to Simón about Un Poeta. I mean, this movie, my goodness, it's just um, it's just fantastic. Uh, uh, Un Poeta follows an aging and erratic has-been poet named Oscar, played by a fantastic Weimar Rios, as we uh, see how his obsession with poetry has brought him no glory. He has become a cliche of the poet in the shadows. When he meets Lottie, a teenage girl in his classroom, he sees an opportunity for reclaiming relevance as he helps cultivate her talent. Uh, it's just an amazing film. It's has so much pathos and humanity and humor, and it's just brilliant. Simón directed numerous short films that feature Amparo, and also works as a professor and lecturer. So I just wanted to hear from you, like how this project came together. What was the inspiration? What was going on in your mind when you decided that this is something that you wanted to explore?
Thank you, and hello, everyone. When I made my first film, this is my second film. My first film in Amparo in 2020, I was a bit kind of frustrated with cinema, to be honest. I was like, because I am also the producer, as many of you, I guess, but producing films in Colombia is a bit of a nightmare sometimes, art housing, stuff like that. So I was in a moment, I was in like 33, 34, something like that, and I finished my first film after a lot of work, and the pandemic was there. We couldn't show the film that year, and I was a bit frustrated because I sometimes I feel like being a filmmaker, maybe here in Colombia, is like being unemployed. You need free time. You don't get paid sometimes. I'm a professor for a long time now. I teach, and that's actually how I live. Sometimes I think I'm a professor who sometimes make films, and and I was a bit frustrated because it was a lot of efforts to make that film, to get the money and everything. And I thought about giving up the idea of cinema, like quitting cinema, and maybe have a more relaxed life, being a teacher full time, a professor at university. And I start thinking, what kind of professor will I become in 20 years if I quit cinema? And I thought, I don't know, maybe I thought like I would be this kind of professor that's like bohemian or alcoholic, like many of those professors that are like bohemians or live out of their memories, their past, what they do when they were young, and fail somehow in their art. So somehow I think I decided at that time to make a film about the worst version of myself in 20 years. I just quit cinema. But I thought that making the film about a filmmaker wasn't that interesting for me. And I was aware of the world of the poetry, the universe of the poetry here in Medellin, Colombia, and the art form of the poetry is a bit of an art form from the past in a way. Like it was more interesting to me, I think. I started realizing that through a poet I can talk about myself and all my dilemmas as an artist, and in general as an artist, because sometimes it happens a lot that we as filmmakers, we put the camera on characters, right? We analyze the world of others. But I was curious about putting a mirror on myself and laugh about it. because in a way, with this idea of frustration that I had, I want to also to exorcise that idea of struggling that sometimes I have on my persona, like you have to suffer to create and you have to stress. So I want to have fun. So I decided to make a comedy to just enjoy the process and to avoid any restriction with the film, you know, like in terms of storytelling. So that's why it is a comedy, I think, because I want to enjoy doing that process, to laugh about it, and just to put a mirror on myself and talk about what it is to be an artist. What are the dilemmas we have, and also around my society here in Colombia to make films or art in general.
Do you feel that there's an expectation to make a certain type of film in Colombia? Do you feel like you're sort of breaking out of that and sort of you know in following this more kind of
Everywhere. We have a tendency to follow trends, that's for sure. And of course, in Colombia, I mean, and also this idea of how the industry works, because art is also an industry and how it works. It was kind of like we in our countries, let's say, we have to raise our voice in a certain way to be listened internationally. Let's say. And this is good to make films or wherever you like, but sometimes in cinema, people don't make films that they really want to do. They do films they think people want to see.
Right. I think there's an incredible universality to this movie, which I'm super excited when the entire world gets to see it. I'm not sure when the release is, but it is completely, absolutely, genuinely so relatable on a million levels. It really plays with class nuances of class and failed dreams and what failing means and what it's just it's pretty fantastic. I think it's a good pivot now to talk about casting. I'm sure you guys have been asked about casting a lot, but all your films really really are so in all of these many different ways so enhanced by the brilliant choices that you guys made as directors and putting building the world of your movie through these spaces and these combination of non-professional and professional actors. I think I heard or read somewhere how Oscar came to you in Poeta. Do you want to talk about it a little bit? We'll start with you, Simón, and then we'll go back around to everybody.
How the actor came.
Yeah. Like, how did you find?
At first, I wanted to cast a professional actor because it was a difficult script with lots of dialogue and actions and movement and things. So it was a bit demanding for an actor. So we made like two casting process, one with professional actors and others. And we also did this casting with the characters from the universe of the poetry in general, or the generation of artists in Medellin from the film that are in the libraries, maybe writers or musicians, this kind of people from the real world, is to create a kind of documentary feeling. And from that casting, Weimar came, and he was very unique. My first impression was that he was not my actor; he was just a poet from the world of the poetry, maybe a secondary or some kind of characters around there. But once we get these clips of the videos of the casting test, I was a bit surprised by him, how particular he was, how unique he was. And it's funny because in the script, the poet is not like that. It's more sober, more serious, more melancholic, I guess. But Weimar was a bit, through his action, his expressions, everything, he kind of changed my own perception of the character. And it was a risk to cast him because a lot of things to do, dialogues and everything. But I like the idea of the film that be risk everything, like and to let the comedy take over in a way. Because at the beginning I was more worried about how much comedy there was, but at the end I didn't care much. I just like tried to put comedy everywhere, and and Wayman was one of those decisions. The way he faced, the way he speaks, the way he runs. So, and he went through a process for working to prepare as an actor.
Oh,
For
interesting. Yeah.
some.
Yeah, he's really fantastic. But really, though, I mean, he's unbelievably funny, and it's also, I think when you were saying that when you started to actually get into the process of making the movie, it started to flow, and it was just starting everything started to fall into place, and you were discovering it as these pieces were coming together. You can really feel that in the filmmaking. There's like a very early scene where he's like drunk and howling at the moon and screaming about poetry, and then there's like a whip pan to him, asleep on the sidewalk at dawn. And it's from that very instant of the movie that you understand the language of the movie, and it's going to be you're going to be allowed to laugh, but in that sort of like painful way that humanity is just so, delicious. Like you're not sure where this guy is going to take you in the film, but it's really interesting. But the casting of the rest of the movie is equally as important. There's your Lottie's family is from a different socioeconomic background, and there's this one scene where these middle-aged men from the poetry world have to come and defend themselves in front of this kind of like tribunal of your Lottie and her family, like sitting there watching them, and it's a really kind of spectacular scene because you were able to sort of really build those two worlds in just this one scene with just like that impeccable casting. So how did you cast the rest of the, you know, actors? Was that through a regular casting process with a casting director, or how did that work?
Yeah, with a great team of casting. Uh, we have a lot of people working on the casting process. We have a lot of characters, as Kleber said. Like I like also like the idea of having many actors, many characters around, like to talk. And I wanted the film to be like that, to be very in a way chaotic, in a way. So it took a long time to cast all these actors. There's a mixture with non-actors and actors. And it was important to take the time to cast them
Yeah.
all because everyone, we tried our best to create very strong characters, even the secondary characters, and all of them to be
Yeah.
shown.
Thank you. Cherien, you are making a movie with three generations of actors. I noticed that I think they all had the same last name. Were they related, or was that a coincidence? Oh, you're mute.
I forgot. I muted myself. No, they're family. They are
You have a
family. And it was
family.
actually four generations of one family. When I started writing the script, I knew that the casting was going to be tricky to create multi-generational family with younger versions of people and older versions of the same characters. And I started thinking about casting very early. And, there is one acting dynasty in Palestine, only one. But essentially, it's like a whole family of actors. Muhammad Bakri is the patriarch, and he plays the grandfather in the film. Sadly, he passed away just last month, which was just devastating. He is in the film along with two of his sons. His oldest son, Saleh Bakri, who plays the lead, and then his one of his younger sons, Adam, who plays the younger version of himself in 1948. And then Muhammad Bakri's nephew plays another teenage character. So it's four generations of one family. And it certainly made my job as a director so much easier because not only do they look alike, they have similar voices, so they sound alike, they have similar mannerisms. It was really beautiful to see, and only two of the characters had scenes together on camera. It was Muhammad and his son Saleh. They played real father and son in the 1970s part of the film. The film takes place during four different time periods. So in the 1970s, Muhammad and his father, had a lot of scenes together, and they just brought so much kind of richness and nuance and depth from their own relationship to that on-screen relationship. And it was really beautiful.
And then, of course, you play a key role. So that's also, unique in this group of filmmakers that you're also acting and directing. And I found that the scenes where there was this incredible patient sense of timing and just really allowed the characters in those scenes to feel what they were feeling. Almost it felt like in real time. I mean, it really kind of slows down into that kind of beautiful, just sort of a lot of patience I felt, And so I was wondering if was that something you always knew going in that you were going to play that part, or was that a decision that was made later, or how was that? That's a lot of, it's difficult to do. So how was that for you?
Yeah, no, it was a great challenge. I'm super sadistic or something. Like to make my life really challenging. No, I did, it's funny because one of my first, like, I usually know that I have my next film when I get a really strong first image or series of images. And for this film, the image it came in rhythm. It was like the staccato rhythm of two teenagers chasing each other, which is how the film opens, and then kind of running into or getting swept up into a protest. And so what starts out as super fun and could be teenagers anywhere in the world you end up discovering, like, oh my God, this is the 1980s in a refugee camp in the West Bank during the first Intifada. And so you're kind of like, you discover that, and then you cut to the face of an old woman and she starts telling the story and she's looking directly into the camera. Like, that was always there. And whether you like that choice or not, the looking straight into camera, and you find out later who she's talking to, but that was always there. And that was like my first series of images. So when I first knew the character, I was like, there's no way I could play her. She's like this old woman. And then I kind of wrote the whole thing and I was like, oh, well, she spends most of the film in her 30s and 40s. And then I had to deal with aging characters and I was like, how am I going to deal with this? And it took a while. Like, the actor in me wanted to play the part at a certain point, and the director in me had to tell the actor just to back off. You know what I mean? Like, wait your turn. I'm not there yet. Like, I have to see other people, kind of a thing. And I really did labor over the decision because I was, directing a massive cast. It was a four-country shoot. I mean, it ended up being a four-country shoot because we ended up having to evacuate Palestine and start all over after the events of October 2023 because we had prepped the whole movie in Palestine. So it was just a lot to take on even before I found out that we were going to have to evacuate and start over and, raise more money and figure out how to keep going during a total crisis. Um, but at a certain point, I think what I realized was that I had a really specific point of view on the character. And this character in particular is kind of the glue. She doesn't play a huge, I mean, she's the female lead, but the film is about men. It's about three generations of men. And, it's about the trauma that's passed between grandfather, father, and son. But I wanted the strong voice of a female character telling that story because the women are so often across cultures, the storytellers and the healers, and we heal through story, right? By telling our story, by processing in this way and sharing it with the next generations. And the character's walking a little bit of a tightrope tonally. And I had a very specific tone I wanted to achieve. And it wasn't until I kind of started seeing people for the part that I realized that I had this very specific point of view and I knew exactly what I wanted from the character and that I was right for the part. But it really took me a while to get there. Like, I was not convinced that I could do it until that moment. And what's good is that at that moment, I also realized, I had really brought together the right crew, like the
Mhm.
right team. I felt really safe with them because, when you're acting as a director, you're that much more vulnerable and you really need people who are going to have your back. And so once I kind of felt safe enough with my crew and really felt like I'm really gonna be able to communicate with them. They're gonna have my back. They're gonna know what I want, even from myself. Then I felt safe enough to kind of jump
Yeah,
into the part.
that's really well described, and it's not really nice to hear you speak to that because you did fantastic. It's a fantastic performance, but I also was
Thank you.
never unaware of how much you were handling, in order to make that space for
I
yourself
mean,
to do that
it's
stuff.
kind of hilarious. Like at one point, I'm literally wearing a pregnancy belly. I'm holding a 1.5-year-old, and I'm in the scene and directing the scene
Yeah,
with this crying baby.
yeah.
I've never done anything more challenging. I mean, making this film was truly one of the greatest challenges and greatest gifts of my life. Like really, both at the same time.
Well, it shows. It's really beautiful. Um, I uh, I want to talk to Oliver. That's a mostly a non-professional cast. The ravers were people you were able to identify out of that scene. I think like the father and the son were pro actors, but I was so moved by you really get to know all of those people. It's like you film them with such love and such care. So even, you sort of introduce the scene and then you start to get to know these people better and the way you sort of like telegraph who they are, what the relationships between them are in the film is really it's really masterful. And I think it has everything to do with the larger concepts of the film about found family and the journey you think you're on and the journey you're on, actually. And you want to speak to how you found those cast members and what made you connect with them and know that they were the right pieces of the puzzle for this film? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you, Alison. Uh, you was talking about family. The casting directors of the film, it's Nadia Simi is a French Algerian woman who was my couple 15 years ago. We were 5 years together, and Nadia,
Oops.
all of us were broken in a way, technically, human beings. But ravers, they show it. They show this wound. They show this scar, And Nadia had to build a new family. A lot of abandon and pain, and so when I met her, I also met rave culture. We were like raving for years, and I was uh, extremely deeply touched by her and by this community, their values. And the way they were taking of care of each other, and Nadia started to be costume designer in all my films. Even when we stopped to be together, we keep being a family, and so she was the costume designer of my two previous films. And for SIRÀT, obviously, she was the perfect person to make the casting. It was the first time for her to make this. And Nadia, she's a wolf. She's a wolf. She has instinct. I mean, she's a woman too, sorry to be essentialist, but it's, she smells people. And at the same time, we were inside. We were inside. I mean, a raver is not someone that you will seduce him, telling him that you are going to make a film. They don't care about money. They don't care about fame. I mean, if they Google me and they see my pictures in Cannes, they will really be totally against. So she was really being an ambassador of the film, of myself. I mean, Biggie, they were friends of us. But we make a calendar, so we were going to raves with a truck that the production buy to us. And so we went like looking for people, for good people. Most of rivers are good people, because when life breaks you, you become humble. And yes, we were looking for a family. They didn't know each other, only two, they know each other. And they had what we really like, of human beings, that is fragility, vulnerability. I think that the spectators is what we also like, because we are vulnerable too. And after, so we had to pick an actor because it was too much people. I mean, I had no. We really needed someone, with craft, with experience, to shoot in making visual effects, making a transformation, helping the others. But the thing is that I don't like to compare a non-professional and a professional actor. I mean, sometimes the good thing of a professional actor is that you are the co-pilot and they drive, The problem with a non-professional actor is like an old car, that you have to go outside the car and you have to push the car in order that it starts, and it stops and you have to push again, I mean, it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of uncertainty, that is also a good thing, the uncertainty. But the good thing but they have this fragility. They have this energy so beautiful when you put a camera in front of them, A problem with a professional actor is that they have a lot of tools, They know how to be always on a comfort zone. So the challenge was to pick for the good actor and also to kill him, to kill the actor. And Sergi Lopez is I mean, for me, always when I see the actor all the time, I see the technique all the time, in most of the films. But I don't feel this fragility, this deep fragility, And Sergi was perfect because he's someone who can build a mask, he can work really technically, but at the same time, it's really someone that is a punk, He doesn't, it's himself, he can really take off the mask, and that was the thing, He had this truth in front of him. He was a challenge for him. It was a mirror for him, and for the non-professional also, he was extremely generous, pedagogical. The first day, the good thing also is that I'm a slow filmmaker, so I have time. They came to my home. We were living for months together, watching film, going to the forest, making rehearsals. And the first thing that Sergio Lopez told them is like, I don't know how to make this film, guys. I mean, it's like I just know that I have to to give my body to the film, and things that my head doesn't understand, my body will tell me.
I think that's a very generous thing to say, to really level the playing field between them. That was a really nice way because then they're all sort of working off of the same sort of visceral, um, you know, um, energy, It was a lovely thing to say to a group of people who might, it might be intimidating to be themselves in front of a camera, and he just sort of leveled it by saying we're all going to learn how to do this together. Kleber, how we talked about Wagner Moura in your movies, amazing. Um, and you also mentioned it's twice the size of your cast that you've ever, handled before. But there's so much world building. There's a world of the cinema. There's Dona Sebastiana's House of the Refugees, which was like impeccably cast. There's the flashbacks to what's the wife's name?
Fatima, yeah.
Fatima and the evil Girotti. I mean, it's just every single universe that exists within the movie is just so full and rich because of this the identification institution, all the people working there. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. Was that a fun part of the process? And was there anything that was surprised you about casting that? And was it did things kind of fall into place easily, or did you have to keep refining until you got what you were looking for? Like, how did that work for you?
Oh yeah, it's I enjoy most aspects of making a film. I think writing is the toughest. And casting is probably the most beautiful, because that's when you find the faces to the characters you wrote. Sometimes you wrote characters thinking about actors, but you never know if they will be able to play in the film. In Wagner's case, of course, I always wrote the film for him. So we have about 60 plus characters in The Secret Agent, which is a little more than Bacurau, which is technically a village, and I had to think just over 50 people. And I should mention that making films in Recife, Brazil, which is in the Northeast, we don't. I mean, looking at the films made in Recife over the last 20 years, we don't really play by the rules of the Brazilian industry in terms of, the faces, the actors. Brazil is heavily, it leans very heavily for decades now on television and on the novellas. So there is a certain type of face that one expects from film and television. And because I was developing this film, which is very much about life in my country, Brazil, and it takes place in the 70s, I just went to look for great faces, great people. And I never really cared if they were professional or non-professional, because because at the end of the day, I think once you look at the film, I never really separate. I think Sebastiana, for example, played by Tânia Maria, she was an extra in Bacurau. We all loved her. She was amazing, and I wrote Sebastiana thinking of her, not knowing if she would be able to play. Then I realized that she would be able to play and she would do very well. She had never acted in in a given situation like the ones we had in the film, with 50 crew, 2 cameras, 3 boom mics, and she would nail every time. So I think there is a wonderful chemistry in this cast, which is helped by the work done by Gabriel Domingues, the casting director, by Leonardo Laca, who's a great friend and is he's like a consigliere. We've been working together for a number of years. Wagner Moura, who of course has an international career, and he enjoys some celebrity status, but never once he he was always very generous. He just made everybody feel great, I just love faces. I like people. I when I choose an actor or an actress, I usually ask myself, would she be great not saying a word for 5 minutes?
Mm.
Would she be great in a 20-minute dialogue sequence, Because it's really about the way one reacts, one acts, and also very much about the way I see the society I come from, which is Brazil. Brazil has the most incredible faces because we are an amazing mix of so much. We are indigenous and African and European and German and Portuguese and
Yeah,
and Spanish, Italian.
there's that funny bit in the film where it's like the price for the assassinations have to do, like, are they white, indigenous, black? And
Right.
white's gonna cost you more, But
Yep.
it's funny,
So
several times the different nationalities are listed as a way of identifying someone. So
yeah, so I remember walking into the casting, the directing room, in our production office, and every day we would have a new picture on what before was a question mark, and now we have a face. And all right, he's going to be great in the film, and
yeah.
it's just a great experience. And I should just point out today we had wonderful news. The film got a nomination for casting, I'm very proud of everybody who worked in the film and the casting. It's just
Yes,
great
fantastic.
people. I love all of them.
Yeah, and well deserved, and congratulations to you and your whole team. I
Thank you.
wanted to just I want to get to a couple of questions from the
Congratulations, Kleber. Well
there.
deserved.
Sorry.
Obrigado.
I wanted to and this I'm going to put out as a general question, and then whoever wants to comment on it can jump in. But we have a lot of filmmakers in our audience, and I really want to talk about collaboration with some of your key creative team. In certain instances, I know that your relationship with your DP can become like an essential union that helps like you know um, design your film. You've all worked with really incredible people on these films, in terms of your production designer and your cinematographers. Is there any way that you worked, and even editors also as well, can really help shape the final film in such a critical way? Is there anyone that you want to talk about, do you want to talk about that creative partnership in vis-a-vis this particular film? Because I'm sure it changes sometimes film to film. Is there anyone that wants to jump in and talk about like a particular
Well,
relationship?
I I really feel, I don't know how you friends, I don't know what your experience is, but I keep repeating the same system. I I really work with people I like and admire, and I would never have to work with somebody I have to put up with
Mm,
just because he or she is so talented, and I just can't stand the sight of that person because we don't get along or because we have different ways of looking at things. So I just had a really happy experiment because it was the first time I worked with Evgenia Alexandrova. She is my DOP in The Secret Agent. And Evgenia is Russian, but based in France.
yeah.
And it was the first time we worked together. She had done a film that Emily produced.
Was that
Uh,
Balconets? No.
well, she did Les Balconettes, but I'm talking about Heartless. It's a
Oh,
film,
Heartless, right.
Brazilian film by Tião and Nara and Normandie. And Evgenia came to the beaches about 100 kilometers south of Recife, and being an European, a Russian based in France and shooting tropical light, I thought she did an amazing job, and I think she could be a really interesting, possibility for us to work together. And it was a really wonderful experience working with Evgenia. Um, yeah, I think it's all about trust, collaboration, and respect. Um, and she was a new member of the team, and I felt the same way that I felt about my older collaborators like Thales Junqueira, who did art direction. It's our fourth film together, and Rita Azevedo, a third film together in costumes, and it's really about getting the friends back for a new film, and it has worked. Not so easy with actors because sometimes if you work with a wonderful actor no one knew, he or she is beginning, or maybe it's the first time you work together, and then the next film he or she is under contract with Netflix or Amazon, and it becomes like, oh, and he and she, and so sad that they can't make the film,
Yeah.
but with the art direction, photography, it's easier because
Yeah.
they can make themselves more available.
Yeah. Simón, I know that you work really closely with your DP, who was also your producer. And I think I heard or read somewhere that the collaboration with working on the film and also just sort of coming back to making a film after a bit of a break, the dynamic between you two created sort of like a re-engagement in the fun and process of filmmaking. And I always think that's a great space to be in when you're working with a DP early on, and you're also looking at locations, and it's a great way of building a film and getting into it. That was that a is that someone you've worked with for a long time? Is that you want to talk about the collaboration there?
Yeah, Juan Sarmiento and I, we are the producers of the film. I mean, my production company we are two partners together with Manuel, the other producer, who is the one who deals with the money. But Juan and I have been friends for 12, 13 years now. We made like most of the things that I've done. And it's kind of like we've done it together. And at some point we decided to produce ourselves to deal with that because it gave us this freedom it's hard to be the ones applying to the funds and to talking to the people, but also the ones to think about the decision of shooting on 16 mil without having much money or whatever that is. I gave us, of course, the freedom we want, but also it enhances our collaboration in a way.
Yeah.
And we've been working together now for different. I mean, every film has a different approach or things, and we always talk. Even from the writing stage, we are already talking about the idea of the aesthetics, or we watch films and talk about them.
I think Oliver also shot on was it Super 16 or 16, Oliver, in the desert. Well, anyway, you're on you. I think it's really fantastic that you guys both shot on film. I think you can see it in the films. There's this kind of like, there's just something.
Alchemy.
Yeah, you can feel it. And it's also nuts too. It's like shooting on 16 millimeter in the desert is also nuts. So there's that kind of brilliant sort of risk taking because you're going to get what you want out of it. And, I can really see and feel the quality of it in Poeta as well. It's lovely. I think it captures the locations really, really well. Cherien, I know you worked with that wonderful DP who did Capernaum, Nadine Lebecky's film.
Yes, I worked with Christopher Oon.
Yeah, yeah, and
Fantastic.
I think you had a lot of challenges with your locations and having to pivot and really having to move and re-scout on a dime. And I think that's great to work with someone who's used to working in that way and can support.
Oh, I don't know anyone's used to working in
Oh,
that.
no, I know that. I
That
know
was
what happened to you
particularly
yeah, yeah. But I
insane.
mean, yeah.
But I worked with Chris, who is Lebanese German, and he speaks Arabic, and so he was able to kind of be right there with me. And when I pivoted, he came with me. I mean, I did end up having to use a different DP for about 20% of the film. I worked with three different assistant directors, four different crews. I mean, it was really bananas. But I loved what Kleber said about like just working with friends, and I feel like I learned that so much on this film. I mean, something I learned from my previous, I would say, films and TV work is like I really learned that I really like to work with instinctual people. I don't want to overthink things when I get to set. I'm happy to think things through as much as possible in prep, really make the right choices. But once I get to set, my instinct has to be free and clear, and over talking or overthinking things kills my instinct. And I knew that going into this film. And so I feel like I finally hired people who like I really, really meshed with. And I have definitely worked with great people in the past as well. I'm not saying, but this time it was just like chemistry with everyone, cast and crew. I mean, it was like amazing. And we became like family. Like to be able to work with them again would just be like such a dream at this point. Like to kind of bring the friends back together, the family back together, and be like, all right, we're making another one.
This
And I
is
mean, Chris was definitely a part of that. Like,
yeah,
we
terrific.
we thought a lot about everything in prep, and then we got to set, and we just really let that kind of like instinct and emotion take precedence. And it was exactly the right balance that I needed.
This is a good segue into the first audience question that I want to. It's a great one. Um, this question from Amita says filmmakers often dread exposition, especially when presenting unfamiliar cultural context to international audiences. How do you strike a balance between giving the audience enough to understand and engage with your story world without over explaining? I mean, I think that I think when you were working with the team where you share that kind of intuition and you can trust the process, you have that support. But does anyone want to speak to that? Because all your films
Also,
are very
specific.
location specific, and they
Yeah.
are in some ways love letters to these locations, and it's literally a character in the film. So how do you convey your story and your cultural context without,
I'll
as
speak to that because
yeah.
I had, my film covers 76 years of history. And, the beginning is starts in 1988 and then it flashes back to 1948. And obviously there's a lot of political context that I could have given. And I think one of the most important things is I think that you discover that in the writing process. And one of the most important things you can do is just allow yourself to overwrite, at least to begin with. Like
Mhm.
you've got to overwrite in order to know where to pull back. Like you just have to. So at the beginning, you don't worry about the exposition. You just write everything that you think like the audience may need to know, and then from there you can really, I think once you start really thinking about the film visually and understanding how much people are going to pick up just from seeing the image, then you really can start to pull back. And sometimes you need someone else to read the script and tell you, you don't need this line, you don't need that line. Like sometimes you're too close to it, so it's like a combination of just overwriting and then kind of slowly peeling back layers and trusting that the audience is going to be with the characters in the story. Because at the end of the day, if you're really focusing on the characters, that's the most important thing, and everything else is kind of just background, and you don't need to worry about the audience getting it all, like you just need to worry about the audience really understanding the main thread of the story, which is your main characters. But so much of that comes through in performance and doesn't necessarily come through on the page. So I think it's a process of maybe overwriting to begin with and then really learning to trust what you're going to create on screen.
No, that makes sense. Does anyone else want to talk about that?
I think, in our case, we trust in cinema. We trust in the ontology of cinema that are images. And in every art, always you make a balance between clearness and ambiguity, no, in between light and shadow. And nowadays we are assisting in a kind of dictatorship of the light, everything is clear. And I think that the key thing, for filmmakers is um, to don't kill our images. The images at the beginning of our creative process, if we are filmmaker of images, obviously, there are several kind of filmmakers, but these images are connected with their own conscient, and they are connected with the collective inconscient in a way. And the problem is that it's so long, a creative process in cinema, the script writing process, the pre-production, the production, that most of the images, they arrive tired to the editing table. They have too much weight. They are dead at some point, So that's the thing, to protect images from ourselves, to really trust on images and to trust on spectators, on the deep and complex sensitivity that the body, and the mind, that the soul of the spectator has. Yes, that's the theory. We'll say after. Obviously, it's difficult, no, but that was our intention.
I want to add that for me, the purpose for me was I was thinking mainly about Colombian audiences because, of course, we don't really have an audience for Colombian cinema. It's quite difficult, and cinemas in Colombia, of course, are for blockbusters, and our films are we are a bit abandoned in terms of audiences, and this is a thing for us because and also because of our craft to make our craft worth is hard, and so I always thought of a film that was not commercial, but popular. And I say popular, similar to a popular song from my country, you know, that people love, but it has values as a piece of art. And I was thinking like that, and I wanted to talk to the audience. Finally, I thought it was more resilient to make a film in a classical way for people to enjoy than to do something more intricate, let's say. Because at some point, I was thinking that maybe we should think about our own audience as well.
Yeah, I think this is
That's
I love what you just said. This is a perfect segue into another, and will be our final audience question, and
Can I
then
just add
wrap up.
something?
Sure, go ahead, Kleber. Sorry.
No, I think it's a really good question. And of course, this film I made, The Secret Agent, is very well received, but sometimes I get reactions from different countries, as in, oh, I wish I knew more about Brazilian history because I think I would have understood more the film. And I always go back to Apocalypse Now, which I think is a really wonderful film, but it never tells you where the action takes place. It never tells you who those Asian-looking people are doing in the film. It doesn't give you a historical context. It doesn't really explain why the guy is stripping out in the bedroom with fire and helicopters and the doors. And I really think that sometimes making films in Brazil and when my films go international, I really feel that for part of the audience, they lack some use in seeing films from different countries because it took me years as when I was very young to understand why in American films some characters would walk around on the street with a beer bottle inside the paper bag. That was never really explained, to me, and that's just something that is done. That's how it's done in the US, because in Brazil, we walk around with a beer bottle on the street without having to put it in a paper bag. So these are cultural bits of information which I really do not explain in my films. My films, they show life, how it's lived, I think, in universal terms, but of course, as a Brazilian film.
Well, I
And
think,
and
yeah,
um, and it's a fascinating question.
yeah,
How
it's
much would you explain? I don't think I should explain because I think the film should be clear enough. In The Secret Agent, it takes about 90 minutes for you to fully understand the situation. But if you trust the film and the filmmaker, you will get your information.
yeah. There's a great. It's more of a comment, but it's a great question comment from an audience member, and this is it. It says there was a time when international film was foreign and niche. And today you're among a generation of incredible filmmakers whose work remains culturally specific yet transcends borders. How has this new reality affected how you make your work? I mean, I think it's a good segue into this idea. And I really agree with this. I think that all these films transcend the sort of label of a foreign film. We're really having such crossover now. It's super exciting. It makes this section international film. Actually, we're now looking at the whole world, and I think that to this audience is we only have like a couple of minutes left, but to this point, I think that Kleber just addressed it, that you just have to be true. And Simón, with the idea that making a movie that would strike a chord no matter who you are watching it or where you were, what country you're from. So, does anyone want to just add a comment to that, and then we'll wrap up this amazing discussion? I guess the question was, how does it affect your future, the way you make your work, the fact that you're on a more global
Uh, I
stage?
have to apologize because I only watched Kleber's film, and I agree with what you said. My film and Kleber's one dialogues, for example, with American cinema a lot. Kleber is a really European Brazilian filmmaker. It's from Spain, but I was raised in France, living in Morocco part of my time. I mean, it's interesting how uh, obviously we are connected with our roots, and making cinema is looking inside, I think, um, and healing in a way. Healing these wounds that our countries has and all this pain, that is heritated from generations to other generations, as Cherien she's evoking with her film. Uh, and at the same time, we belong to this family of of cinema and this language cinema, that is, I mean, we are interconnected in a way, and yeah.
I think that we're gonna need to wrap it up now. We're at the end of our time. I honestly feel like I could speak to you guys for another several hours. It's so interesting to hear your insights and and a little window into your process. These are really tremendous films. I'm really excited for them to come out into the world. And I wanted to thank you so much for your time, Cherien, Oliver, Simón, Kleber. Um, and thank you for the uh, everyone watching out there. I just want to congratulate you again on these wonderful films and your nominations and the future success of the films. And I hope that you can, see each other on the circuit and say hi. We've made some connections here. That's lovely. All right.
Thank you very much.
Definitely. Looking forward
Yeah.
to seeing you all at the SIRÄT Awards. And yeah, thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much for having
Thank you
me.
very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations to all.
Yes.